This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 49. In this episode, we interviewed the participants of a panel, InfoPath is a Dead End, What Form Solution Should Your Forms Take? From SPTechCon, recorded live September the 24th, 2014.
Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Windows Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, Link, and related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Chris Johnson.
And I'm Andrew Call.
And we're just two dudes telling you how we see it.
So this is the third part in our three-part series, recapping the panels from the SPTechCon conference that was in Boston the week of September 15th through the 19th. Before I dive into the meat of this, it's just me today, no CJ. We couldn't make it work between the two of us. That's no big deal because he was on the other three as well. Just a couple things just to kind of touch on. I do want to call out, we've had a couple extra rating and reviews that have shown up in iTunes for the podcast. So we've now got 10 5-star ratings and 1 4-star rating. No 3, 2, or 1-star ratings, which is good, but we'd love to have some more ratings. It helps people find the shows. So if you are listening on iTunes, I'd love it if you'd go into the site, go into iTunes and leave us a review. You don't even have to leave a comment, but I would appreciate if you would leave a review. If you're not, then if you can leave a review by just dropping a comment in Twitter or just by sending it in through our website so that we can read it out on the air. We recently had another one that did come up by a gentleman by the name of Sean Lloyd. Sean says, "Hey guys, love the show. I have been more than a little confused about BI in the last episode." So he's talking about the episode where we interviewed Seong Ri recently. That was episode number 44. He also says, "I'd love if you guys would do one about the new SharePoint app model replacing InfoPath," in referencing a link that Tobias Zimmergren had on his blog where he referenced it. So using the app model for doing forms. From my perspective, it's definitely a good option. I mean, if you're using the app model for it, you're basically just building a custom form using the standard web development technologies, so ASP.NET or some other server-side platform, HTML, CSS, JavaScript to build your form. It's a pretty good timing because this is something that we're going to get into with the panel that came out today. So I'm going to wait to go through and actually answer the bit of this. I don't think we don't have content for an entire episode on this, but it was something that we talked about in the panel outtakes that I'll play in just a moment. We did have an interview, a 5-star review that came out in iTunes. This one, and I'm going to apologize for probably not stating your name or pronouncing your name correctly. Sukranath Tanjapali. That was my best attempt. So again, apologies. It says, "This is one of the best podcasts that I've heard. I can even say it's the best. The show is very informative, useful, and interesting. It covers so much of the latest information. So far, it's very consistent on the quality and the content. Keep up the great job, and thanks for the show." So thank you very much. Really do appreciate that comment. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the new quality that we have of the show, as he mentioned, because we now have a producer that's mixing it down and you don't have someone with no audio background, such as myself, or specifically myself, doing this. So it's now just straight up coming from a real audio producer. So this episode, we have a recording here I'm going to play. It's for one of the panels that happened at SPTechCon. The title of the panel was InfoPath is a Dead End. What form solution should your forms take? Microsoft has announced that the InfoPath product is a end-of-life product. Learn what options are available to create and manage your forms. This is a panel that I was not able to participate in because it happened at the exact same time of another panel that I participated in. But Lori Gowen, who is with Microsoft, she moderated the panel between herself, Laura Rogers, Mark Rackley, and Jennifer Mason, 3 people who are very much square in this space. Jennifer Mason and Laura Rogers speak to more the business and the end user and power user audience. Mark Rackley is going to speak to a similar audience, but he also has a bit more of a developer slant to him. So why don't I go ahead and just play this, the interview that we had that happened later in the day from the panel, and I'll just come back with a very quick little recap of the interview. All right, so here we are with another one of our bunch of people that were on another one of the panels that we had today here at SPTechCon. So again, just like the other episodes we've done, we are talking to some of the panelists and just getting their thoughts on the after show and some of the topics that were discussed. So unlike the other ones, I wasn't involved in this one, so I didn't hear the questions, so this should be interesting. But on the other side, this is one of those topics that I think that we have all beat the hell out of. And this poor horse over here is now way down under the ground. So we're going to talk here about the forms story in SharePoint. So before we get started, let's just run around the room and find out who we have in the room here. So starting here to my left.
My name is Mark Rackley. I am a developer and consultant for a company called Capspire. And I have a lot of experience kind of customizing SharePoint's forms and developing some form solutions. So I have opinions on this, definitely.
Cool. Fantastic.
Jennifer Mason. I work at Rackspace Hosting. I focus on helping information workers and end users build no-code solutions. So if it involves a syntax and a semicolon, it usually falls out of the scope of what I do. So a little different here than Mark. So I've been a consultant for a lot of years, just helping people build stuff with SharePoint.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
I'm Laura Rogers, also at Rackspace Hosting, SharePoint MVP, and been using SharePoint for about 10 years. Started off as a server admin, and I love building custom business solutions in SharePoint using no-code solutions, especially forms and workflows.
Fantastic.
I'm Lori Gowan. I'm a Premier Field Engineer for Microsoft. I focus mostly on the IT pro side, but also do a lot of power end user stuff. I actually started working with Laura, and she and I did a lot of end user customization using InfoPath back in the day.
You said
10
the
years
bad word.
ago.
I didn't know we were busting out the 4-letter words in here. I gotta get the censorship also. Cool. Okay, so this topic, like we said, has been beat to death. And in the pre-show, before part of this interview, we let CJ talk a little bit about what the Microsoft story is today. And so there's, as we all know, there's a lot of kind of what now, or what do I do now? So there's a lot of confusion. As we saw on the panel, as you guys saw on the panel, there's a lot of questions that are out there, and there's a big need for it, right? So, and a lot of vendors that would love to solve it for them.
Right.
So let's start off first, and let's say that I'm a customer and I need some sort of an electronic forms solution. What are my options today? Is InfoPath a viable option? Should I go third party? Do I need to get a developer? Do I go outside of SharePoint? What do I have? What's available to me? So, Laura, how about I let you start it off?
Okay.
Starting from right to left.
Okay, so today what I've been advising people is really to think carefully and look at what the requirements are for what you actually need. Do you actually need a rich, complex form and a workflow behind it? Is a list form going to be enough for you? And look at what the options are that are out there and find the tool that best meets that specific need. What we've run into so many times is people went to InfoPath because they could, and they tried to make it the one-size-fits-all solution. And we're just not seeing that in the form space. Most things are not one-size-fits-all. We need to make sure we use the right tool for the right solution. And so my advice to people is if InfoPath is the right tool because it's the one that's available right now, then do that, but make sure that you're doing it wisely and planning ahead for what may be coming down the line. Good guidance there. How about you, Laura? You have a take? Anything
Sure.
to add or differ on?
I agree with Lori, and I'd like to add a great example for the InfoPath. The InfoPath example she gave, I had a client that talked to me the other day that had about 20 or 30 forms that they had created in InfoPath that they were about to publish to Office 365. And when I asked them why they used InfoPath, the only reason they could give me was that they wanted a certain color and they wanted a certain logo on the forms. So that kind of scenario wouldn't be a good reason to go with InfoPath. You could use a list form. You could use just a tiny bit of code to make it look a certain color. And so you have to consider all the different factors and have a specific reason to use it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Jen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I'd say look at your resources and see what you can do. So really you have 3 options right now. You use a SharePoint list, you use Access Services, you use InfoPath, or you use Other. And as soon as you get into Other, you have a whole slew of options to choose. Everything from custom code to third-party solutions. A lot of it, though, as we think about forms, we're trying to automate business solutions. If I was to be working with a client right now and they're building out a major solution that impacts the entire business, it's going to be used by everybody, it's going to take hundreds of hours, super complex, InfoPath would not be in the set of tools that I think would be a wise thing to use. If I'm going to automate a quick process of collecting data and doing something with it, I'm going to sit and think about it for a little bit. In a year and a half, in 2 years, how relevant is this going to be? And how much time am I going to lose if I do have to rebuild the solution? And in most cases, I'm going to make decisions based on that. So it's going to be what's available to me as a company, where I think I'm going to go, and the life of the project. I don't want to overanalyze and spend so much time thinking about how am I going to build this when I can look at the overall scope of the project and probably decide pretty quickly what's the right tool for this now and in the future.
Good. That's a good point. Good points. Mark, how about you? You might have a bit of a, with your background being a little bit different than the other three here, you might have a bit of a different take.
Well, I agree with everything they've said for the most part.
Oh, well, there goes my point.
Well, except for where they're wrong, I agree. No, kidding. So as a developer and as someone who's been doing forms for a while too, I think you really need to look at what is going to be the least work going forward, because we don't know the future. We don't know what Fossil is, what it's going to do.
Fossil, what's that?
That is Microsoft's form solution for customizing the out-of-the-box list forms in SharePoint.
It's called Fossil, or does it stand for something?
Does it stand for something?
Stands for forms on SharePoint lists.
Forms on SharePoint lists.
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I just call it Fossil because it's already antiquated. I don't know.
Yeah, it already sounds like it's old and we don't even see it yet.
Right, but that's not out yet. We don't know what that's going to look like. And you've got forms you want to create today. I think you should create forms that are going to be as easy to migrate tomorrow, right? As easy as possible to migrate. So I would stay away from InfoPath for many reasons. But, you can do things like Laura was saying, apply some script and some CSS to the out-of-the-box forms, and you can style them however you want to style them. And most of the time, that's what people use InfoPath for, is just to make the form look nice or not look like SharePoint. So you can do that very easily. If you have someone on staff who knows HTML and JavaScript, I actually did write a Codeplex solution. It's called Forms 7. It's at forms7.codeplex.com.
Yep, we're gonna make sure we put it. I'm gonna interrupt you really quick before I forget about this. So that link, along with all of the contact information for everybody that is sitting here with us, Laurie and Laura and Jen and Mark, all that's going to be in the show notes. So please, make sure you check those out to find out how to contact them. More questions and stuff, Twitter, blogs, we'll put all that stuff in there, including Form 7 as well, and the other things that we're going to mention here too. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No problem.
Please jump right back in.
So and I created Form 7 for a client who had an InfoPath need but did not want to use InfoPath. They had Lotus Notes, and they wanted to get all their payroll forms off Lotus Notes, and they did not want to use InfoPath. So I created a jQuery library that you could create a plain HTML form using any HTML editor you want to. So a business user can create an HTML form if they have a program for it, right? So you create an HTML form and you wire it with 2 lines of script to this library, and it will actually parse your form and store all that form content into one field in a SharePoint list. Like with InfoPath stores it all as an InfoPath file on your form. And so this way you can grow and expand your list. And they ended up storing 9 different payroll forms in one SharePoint list. And it's been going for 2 years now, and they love it. So I kind of turned it into this library that people use.
But it's more of a developer kind of a solution.
You do need to use you need to know HTML and JavaScript. I have some video tutorials to walk you through it. I think if you've got an HTML editor and you can copy and paste 2 lines of code, you can give it a try and see if you can make it work. Because that's all there really is to it when it comes down to it.
That's a good point. Laura, do you have something to add?
An HTML editor built into SharePoint is just, create a SharePoint announcement and start editing it using the little rich text editor, and then hit the
Source
view
code.
code. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Jen?
So one thing I think is I love what Mark said, and I love that he said it's got to be easy. And so I think we need to go back to what does easy mean in the real world? And it's going to completely 100% depend on your circumstances. Is it going to be easy to redo what I did? Is it going to be easier to redo what I did than to hire a developer now to do it? Is it going to be easier to not have to redo anything later, so it's going to be easier for me to fight for the resources now? And I think that's going to be unique across every organization and culture. So what I see happening a lot with people is they're getting really stressed out about this. And some of it's just everybody chill out. What's going to work for you today, knowing that no matter what we pick, we could all be wrong. I mean, we don't know the future, but it's okay if every company has a little bit of a different strategy to do this, because what's going to be easy for one company might not necessarily be easy for another.
And it's also going to, I would say it would also depend too on the audience that you're going for, right? Because now with something like Office 365, a company can now jump in, get into the SharePoint ecosystem, but not have to have an IT staff, not have to have developers or admins. Before, you almost always had at least somebody that was be able to babysit the servers. That did something that was more, at least like an IT pro that at least had some like strong technical background who maybe could do something HTML or JavaScript or something. The other thing too that, what do you guys think about, whatever we choose, it just, even though we might be wrong or we don't know, we can't really see what the future is. There's also, I think there's big assumption that says that whatever Microsoft comes out with, that's what we're going to be using. We're going to all jump on board with it. So, I mean, would you think it's pretty fair to say that there's a very good chance that if you have something that works great for you, that you find this an alternative to what we have in SharePoint today, that when this vNext story that comes out, you don't have to jump over to that, because that still may not be what they do, still might not be what you're really looking for. It still might be misaligned. So you still might have your existing solution. So
excellent point.
Yeah, so you want to just make sure that you're you want to be, I don't want to say future proof, but as future proof as you can be. Make sure you don't box yourself into a solution. Laura?
Let's talk about the very first thing that Microsoft said that they were going to replace InfoPath with. Access.
Yeah.
They said, okay, we'll just stop using InfoPath and everyone's just going to use Access instead, use databases. So there are a lot of kind of, people asked about this in our panel today. There are just some kind of pros and cons you need to know about in Access database. It's a great, easy way to build a relational database and whip up forms where you just drag the fields onto the form, kind of an interface that you're familiar with in InfoPath. But some of the negatives are that once you build a database, if you have access to the database, you have access to all the tables, and you don't have separate permissions like you do with lists and libraries. You don't have workflows, you have macros, but workflows don't, the macros in there can't send emails kind of like SharePoint Designer workflows can. And you don't have any kind of attachments or files that you can put in there. You can see SharePoint list data, but you can't interact with it. You can just read it. So for people that are thinking that Microsoft said to go Access, that they're going Access, that those are just some kind of considerations to know before you kind of go that direction.
So you said something there too, and I guess we're moving on to the next thing that we want to talk about, which is some alternatives that we have to what options are out there for me. So let me ask, would you consider, being a dev, I at least recognize that I have certain tinted glasses that I'm going to look at stuff and say that is that way. But I know I'm a dev that's speaking it. So from your perspective, specifically, the three ladies here, do you see the access and building tables and dragging the control stuff of forms? Do you see that as like a true end user, or is that a power user thing, or is that like a technical business user or business admin? Business analyst? Where do you see that really working? Yeah.
Anybody who's creating forms, I think, would at least have to be more of a power user. Because I see end users as the people filling out the forms.
So that's your bar. That's the bar you're going to set. Okay. Jen?
And I'd say that that's something that's also quite a bit unknown, right? So Access services, how many iterations are we in? And every time I talk to people, what we're basically saying is if you have a business process that you want to automate that has no security requirements, no workflow requirements, and doesn't need to store any type of documentation, then Access Services is the tool for you.
So you basically just described that one scenario.
Yeah. Right. So since that knocks out 90% of the people that would be doing it, there's not a lot of real world feedback that says, yeah, this tool is super awesome so people can use it. So if I was to say 1-to-1, it is not a replacement. It's another option, but I don't think anything that we're listing is a replacement for it. It's another option to do the same type of thing, but it's all different pieces. But
how much faith do you guys have in Access being around, being in the future? If you did go through an investment like that, going back to the point that I made, being around and having investments being made there, because you made a good point. We're on the third iteration of it, and how much innovation do we see, or how much improvement do we see in each one of these releases? I don't use it a whole lot, but I don't see a whole lot.
I wouldn't put a ton of faith into starting to build all of these solutions, assuming that all of those other pieces are going to come.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I would wait and see what's going to happen. Who knows, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to really be able to treat Access services as this huge replacement and this thing where I can build business processes, because the fundamentals of the things that the users I'm working with are trying to do cannot be done today in Access services.
Yeah, and so I'm going a bit with like the concept, like a feeling that I have. I'm trying to draw an analogy here. The feeling I have like with themes, that am I going to spend a ton of time investing theming engine in SharePoint today? No. Why? Because it's changed 3 times in 3 different versions. So I've got every right to believe it's going to change again. So
right. So Access hasn't changed too much in terms of like drastically changing over the things. So basically what I do, can I build it in a simple SharePoint list? Will it fall under that small category of what I can do in Access? Then I'll go do it. But if it falls under that small category, it's not going to be super complex, and I can probably rip off a template that already exists. Yeah. So I don't have to put a ton of effort into it. And then it's that other bucket where more effort has to go.
Can we build it? Yes, we can. We got the Bob the Builder edition right here all of a sudden. Laura, did you have something to add?
So what she was talking about earlier when she touched on about a replacement, I don't think there is a replacement for InfoPath. Because I think InfoPath was the tool that got all of these things that people wanted to be able to do, and they just started trying to cram it in. And now what we're doing is stepping back and saying, wait a minute, we need to look at the bigger picture here. What is the process that we're trying to handle, and what's going to be the best tool? So there's not going to be just one. It can't be just Access. It can't be Fossil by itself. It can't be any of these one things, because like she said, there's so many different businesses, and what works best for that business is going to be different across all of it. So I think we really have to think about it like that, is there's going to be a decision point that you have to make now. What's going to be the best tool for this scenario? And it could be the same business has different scenarios, and it's a different answer for each one.
That's a good point. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about like a developer solution. You've got an out-of-the-box one. The obvious one, I think, is to just go hire a web dev that's going to build an HTML form, JavaScript, CSS, and save it somehow to some database or list or service or whatever. We've talked a little bit about Access. Do any of you, talking about some of the other alternatives, I mean, what about the alternative actually being InfoPath? Do you recommend anybody continue to do anything with InfoPath, or do you tell them, nope, it's a dead one, day away? Mark, I'll let Mark start first.
So I kind of said this today in the panel too. If that's what you're comfortable using, and you've got work you've got to get done, right? There's the reality of my work has to get done.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, you may have to redo that form. You will have to redo that form someday if you're going to have it for a long time.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind that, hey, are you okay redoing this? Then, get your job done.
Okay, that's a good point. Jen?
Again, it's the scope of what they're trying to do. So if somebody comes, we need an overall form solution. Here are, 1,000 forms that we need to do, and we need to do all that. I'd say, let's go look at some alternatives, maybe a third-party product. Let's go look at different things. But if it's down to organizations that say, I'm on this version of SharePoint, I'm not allowed to write code, I'm not allowed to install anything, and we're not allowed to spend any money, but this is what I need to do, you have to go with InfoPath. There's no way around it. And then the other thing is, if it's a throwaway solution, which adding a logo, changing a color, making something look not like SharePoint can pretty much be a throwaway solution. So in a couple of years, in 6 months, in 3 weeks, whenever Microsoft comes out with whatever the heck they're going to come out with, who cares if I lose it? Like, sometimes it just doesn't matter. So for that, just keep using InfoPath. Okay. I still use InfoPath quite a bit in 2013.
I'm sorry to hear that. Laura, how about you? Laura, how about you?
So I agree a lot with what Jennifer said. Basically, you have to think about each specific form that you're going to be building and what it needs. If it needs InfoPath, definitely I keep using InfoPath here and there if I absolutely have to. But I've a lot of cases where I would have just quickly whipped up an InfoPath form. Now I'm just creating a SharePoint list and just dealing with it that way and keeping it super simple.
Okay, Laurie?
And that's exactly what I'm seeing a lot of too, is basically the same thing. Is yes, InfoPath is still your viable solution if you need it. Look at what you're doing with it. And then also, when you use it, do it wisely. Like she said, creating the list first, because we know lists are going to upgrade, right? They're going to be there. So if you need that form and you want that data to stay there, and you don't want to deal with whatever the migration solution may or may not be, if there is one, I don't know.
Yeah.
then if you still need InfoPath on top of that, you still have all that data saved in that list, and that list is never going to go away.
Yeah.
And then you can just throw away the form that's been customized on top of it and put whatever else needs to go on top of that.
That's a good
So
point.
don't do form library forms, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's one to stay away
That's a
from.
whole different.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of
Okay.
storing stuff. So in the last couple minutes that we have here, how about we rattle off a couple of the other alternatives that are out there, like maybe vendor solutions or something. You don't have to recommend anything. I'm not trying to get you guys to hawk a product or anything, but what other things should customers look at? Is there, what other things does Microsoft have to offer out of the box? Do they have anything? Laura?
Well, this JS link thing, this is a developer thing, but it is super simple code that gives you the ability to do conditional formatting. And so that's one of the huge things that people want to do in SharePoint Design or Design View. And in InfoPath is just conditional formatting, even if you don't have a bunch of crazy rules and things like that. Just show things differently according to other conditions. And so, and I've blogged about it, but it's JS link and it's writing a JavaScript file, but all you have to do is know how to, the small bit of syntax to be able to say, if this condition equals positive, negative, whatever, show this color red, or, it's, so I think it is code, but for people that are really those power users that are trying to learn those type of solutions and take it a step farther and be able to dig in, it's something that's obtainable that you could figure out.
That's interesting you say that. That is the first time I've ever heard super simple and the CSR, the client-side rendering, which is what JS Link is, mentioned in the same sentence. And it's coming from not a developer, so that was impressive. Okay, so JS Link is one option. Anybody have another one, that any out-of-the-box things we could throw in?
So one of the things we haven't talked about is Excel surveys. I have actually been experienced with Excel surveys lately in different ways. All of us do SharePoint Saturday events, and the most recent SharePoint Saturday DC, there, if you want to go speak, is an Excel survey. And I filled it out on my phone, so it's mobile, it does all that stuff, it's already there, it's out of the box, it just works.
But it's Office 365.
It's Office 365, it is right now. But that is a very viable option, especially if all you're doing is collecting data. You really just need to collect that data and have it stored somewhere. And you can use it. You can even create some pretty reports in Excel on it because it's going to store it all in Excel. So there's a lot of options there, I think, depending on your use case. But that's something that I've actually run into, and I went, this is Excel surveys. I can do it on my phone. That's really cool. And so being able to fill something out from wherever you're at and whatever device you're using is a big thing that we're seeing too.
That's a good point. Yeah. So anything else out of the box? Can you guys come? Oh, yep.
The Word documents in quick parts. So you can have a Word document. We talked to a customer yesterday who has a very long form, and then it's almost like a template, and they need to fill in different things. So you can have a list with the quick parts that then puts it all together, and you get that Word document. So that would be one example of it. Also, sometimes just going back to a Word document, which is a structured document, and doing it as content type and guiding them through filling it in. You don't get all of the logic, but sometimes, how many times do we say, if you can give me an 80% solution, I'm happy? Sometimes maybe it's just looking for that 80% solution.
Good point. What about Mark? Yeah.
So I'll give you a link to this blog post. I wrote a blog post several months ago that has a little chunk of script that allows you to create an HTML template for your SharePoint form, your out-of-the-box form. So an example I use that a lot is I create a tabbed view of a SharePoint form, and the little script that you can copy and paste from my blog will actually move all the SharePoint fields into the tabbed view. So you can make things look however you want them to look using any HTML, and it just kind of moves the form around the way you're seeing it and it's displayed. So a lot of people have found that to be exactly all they need for their forms too.
That's
Is that
really
a JS link thing?
It's a script that you drop on the page. Actually, you just drop in the content editor web part on the form.
Cool. Or script was a script web part, right? We have a script web part too.
You do. It depends on how you want to do it. Because if it's you need an HTML for the file, which you would, and then you need your JavaScript that does the moving of the fields into your HTML file.
That sounds like another good option there.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so what about vendor solutions? What vendors are out there that you guys can think of that have something?
So I partner.
Mark, please go right ahead.
At CapSpire, we actually partner with Nintex, so I have some experience with Nintex, and they have a great tool for end users or business users, power users to be able to create their forms. Right, you don't need to be a developer at all, and I guess they have a really good mobile experience too, where they can do offline forms and stuff. So I definitely check those guys out.
Yeah, they got a lot of capabilities. They have a lot of capabilities that yes, it's one that we could definitely we'll put a link to it in the show notes. People can go take a look at that link. Anybody else? Yeah.
K2.
K2, yeah, K2's got, what's their product called?
They have forms,
They have
they have workflows.
Appit is that their workflow?
Ford Thinker or something. They've got a lot of stuff in the forefront of what's coming out. So you've got the traditional K2, and now you've got them in this new space where they've got some things that kind of address this and other things that are coming, some things for Office 365. How do you like that for a definitive answer?
Well, so
but it puts them on the list of people to check out.
Yeah, K2, another company to definitely take a look at what their offering is, because that's they do innovate quite a bit. They got a lot of stuff, and that's if they're coming out with a lot of stuff right now, even if we don't know the name, having a hard time coming up with the name of it for just sitting in the room here, it's at least something that people know where they can go target to go look at.
Yeah, definitely.
At least if I can throw down a PO and I can actually pay for something and fix it, that might solve the problem for a lot of customers.
And we've had some customers also do some things with Adobe Forms, different things like that cost more money. You've got different things, but I mean, there are other form solutions out of the stack.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's other things that are happening.
Yeah.
So.
Laura, do you have some?
So K2 and Nintex are probably the two I see the most, but I'm also seeing a lot of Qdabra,
Okay.
and Formotus is doing some stuff too.
Okay.
There's some smaller vendors, but they've got some good stuff out there, and definitely partnered with us and working in that space.
I have to definitely grab those show notes as well and put those in there too. I know I use Google Forms for a lot of the stuff too to integrate it, and it's very much like Excel, like the Excel survey view stuff too. But same thing, you get an Excel spreadsheet that comes right out of it from the results. So it's another free offering. I know that would look pretty awkward. It does look pretty awkward at times to sit there and have a Google Form sitting in Office 365, but hey, whatever. On the dev side, we're using Angular, so it's all good. Cool. Does anybody have any parting thoughts that you kind of want to, any guidance, just short little guidance you have for any customers that are in this space and just kind of feeling very scared at this time? Laura?
It depends.
It depends. There we go. Well, you've checked off your SharePoint consultant requirement for the day. Jen?
Just chill out. It's not the end of the world.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, Mark?
I was going to say what Jennifer said. Just wait and see, right? Unless you have an urgent need, calm down. Let's wait and see what happens. And otherwise, go download Form 7. It's free. Right?
Good plug. Laura, anything?
So that's basically what I'm telling people is that, what you've got today is still viable. It still works for now. Make sure you're using it wisely and just relax. It's not the end of the world yet.
Yeah. I think
Yet.
I just tell people look, Microsoft has said that they want to do something here. They have expressed their awareness that there is a need there and customers want it, and there's a pain point there. But I mean, you can decide to sit around and wait, or you can decide to try and start running with something now. It's just
And let's remember, that InfoPath is the tool that we absolutely love and absolutely hate all at the same time.
I don't love it at all.
Just like SharePoint?
SharePoint Designer, it's another one just like that.
I was just about to say, please don't speak for all of us about the tool.
Yeah, sorry, they hate it. They've always hated it. But I love it and hate it all at the same time. So I'm not sad to see it go.
There you go. Cool.
So I wish there were faster replacements, but I also wish for a lot of things. So now just kind of chill out and see what happens.
There we go. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much, Mark, Jen, Laura, Laurie. I really appreciate you guys taking your time to sit there and talk to us a little bit about the panel you did today, and hope you guys have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so I first want to just thank you, Lori Goen, Laura Rogers, Mark Rackley, and Jennifer Mason. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join me to recap the panel. If you check the show notes, we have links to all of their information, their blogs, and also where you can find them on Twitter. All that stuff is listed up on the post on our website, MicrosoftCloudShow.com, and it's all going to be on episode 49. We've talked about this subject quite a few times about InfoPath on the podcast. We touched on it with the news when Microsoft announced it was end of life back in episode 17. And then we also talked about it in a recap show from the SharePoint conference earlier in this year, 2014, in episode 21, where Microsoft talked a little bit more about the Form story and what it was going forward. I think from my point of view here, the big takeaway is that we don't know where Microsoft is going very specifically. We don't know what the next story is going to be around Forms, especially inside SharePoint. But what I think, as I mentioned during the chat that I had with Lori and Laura and Jennifer and Mark Rackley, what you don't have to do is you don't have to sit around and wait for Microsoft to come up with a solution. There are plenty of options that are available to us today. Some of them are out of the box in SharePoint, like using the Excel survey or using Access Services. Some things are custom, where you're going to need to get a web developer to use something like the app model, say from the question that came in from one of our listeners I read out at the beginning of the episode. And then there are also third-party solutions, like things offered by K2 and by Nintex and by some other of the vendor companies that we mentioned in the show, as well as like some custom solutions that are more kind of, grab it and use it inside of your environment, like what Mark talked about with his Forms 7 product. We have a link to how to work with this Forms 7 product working inside of that are also in the show notes that we mentioned during the interview. Again, you don't have to wait for something. You can pick something right now. You can still, I guess, continue to use InfoPath. I personally am not so much of a fan of that option, but the product is still supported and it will be supported for quite some time. What I think that you don't want to do is you don't want to pick something that is so incredibly unique that you may not be able to either migrate it over to what Microsoft comes out with when they do have a form solution for SharePoint. I think that's at least... that part of it is almost a given. We do know that they're going to come out with something. But when they do come out with something, it may not meet your needs. And so you may stick with whatever option that you chose. You may go with, like, say, something from K2 or Nintex or one of the other vendors, or you may decide to build all of your own stuff custom. And then when you see what comes out and Microsoft says, here's what the new story is for forms inside of SharePoint, you may say, that's not going to fit what I need for my company. We're just going to stick with what we're using. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing is saying you have to go with this new option that they're going to come out with. So just take that for what it's worth. The only recommendation that I would give is don't wait for Microsoft to announce what they're going to do. If you've got a need for it today, there are plenty of options for plenty of different audiences that you can leverage inside of SharePoint and Office 365 today. Pick one and go with it. Or pick a couple, evaluate them, and go with it. Don't wait around. Okay, so again, thank you very much to Laura, Mark, and Jennifer, and Lori for taking the time to rehash the panel with me. Again, sorry CJ wasn't with us this week. He'll be back with us next week. And that wraps up our 3-part series that we had from SPTechCon. Again, we won't be focused. The show is not designed to be focused just around SharePoint, while SPTechCon is specifically focused around SharePoint. We did spend a significant amount of time talking about Office 365, which is a major play on the Microsoft Cloud story. So the other one being Azure with a couple other services as well. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, and we hope to talk to you soon. Please send in your questions, leave us a review in iTunes, or send it to us in on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.
If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or MP3 and provide a link so we can play your question on the show. You can subscribe to us in iTunes by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find full transcript and show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.